It's good to have you. Can I check from Shanaz?
Recording in progress.
Apologies this morning.
Good morning, Chair, and all on the platform. So the apologies we received were from the Minister, who's involved with the IEC's registration drive within the PSET sector. And then the Deputy Minister's got some stakeholder engagements that's scheduled for the same time. And then quite a few from the members who's got all party responsibilities, especially from the DA component, won't be here today. So that's King, Gagau, and Machesi. And then the FFP, Mr. Boshoff is not here, Dr. Boshoff. And then IFP, Mr. Zondo. And then of the EFF, Mr. Bukhali also put the apologies on. So those are all the apologies, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Shanaz. Yeah, things are gonna get tougher and tougher as we go towards elections. But I mean, I think one of the resolutions of our midterm review last year was that, I mean, to look at doing our work from a subcommittee level, and of course through the adoption of reports by the entire committee, then you have an appreciation of the work being agreed to by the entire committee. So we are going to have to continue with the work. Of course, it's in the adoption of the reports where we do have to meet quorum and ensure that the reports are agreed to by the entire committee. With that being said, I want to welcome DG Mdraga. It's great to have you, DG. We'll be receiving a presentation from yourselves on the third quarter expenditure and performance report for 2022-2023. So at this point, I'd like to hand over to yourself, DG, as well as your team.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thanks very much to the members. I hope I can quickly share. I think this is the presentation, and I then need to go to the beginning of it. So again, Chair, thank you very much for the opportunity, as we are always extremely delighted to engage with you on the work that we do. So today, we hope to just quickly go through the vision, mission, outcome goals, achievements per outcome goal, give you some highlights that we'd just like to share with you, and then we'll give you the overall performance, an overview of the performance per each program, and then where we are on the finances and conclusion. So you remember the vision, increase well-being and prosperity through science, technology, and innovation, and we hope to provide leadership and enabling environment and resources for science, technology, and innovation in support of the country's development. These are the goals: a transformed, inclusive, responsive, coordinated, and efficient national system of innovation. It's the vehicle that we use to drive the vision and the mission. We need human capabilities and skills for the economy and for development. We have to have knowledge that we generate and innovation that we derive out of that and elsewhere. Of course, that knowledge that is being developed can be utilized for economic development, inclusive development, and we also identify innovation to support a capable state. So just to quickly then go through some of the highlights, the committee would remember that Cabinet has approved the final version of the STI Decadal Plan, and we are now starting to delve deeper into the implementation, including a detailed conceptual clarity on climate change and environmental sustainability, future-proof education and skills, a future of society. These are the SGCs that we had identified. And then we continue to look at how we can use knowledge to modernize economy in mining, agriculture, and manufacturing. I'll give you one example on agriculture today. We continue to work with the CSIR and others to drive new sources of growth on digital and circular economies, and then health innovation, energy innovation, and then innovation-enabled capable state, and innovation in support of social progress. The second IMC Interministerial Committee on STI was held on November 22nd last year. Chair, I tend to have this problem of my slides not moving. All right. So on the human capital development, this is the breakdown of the total beneficiaries for BTech honors and master's students, doctoral students, just over 2,000. And then we also look at the interns that we place in STI institutions. And this is the breakdown in terms of Black, 4,000, 3,000 women, Black women, just over 2,500, people with disabilities, 58, and 6 South Africans. So we are aware that we have promised you this evident transformation agenda across all dimensions. So just to remind the committee that a task team has been established to create a robust evidence-based transformation agenda for the next 10 years and to identify appropriate reforms, actions to be implemented by ourselves and the entities. One of the areas we are aware we will just keep apologizing is people with disabilities. We think there's a lot to do in that area. On intellectual property and tech transfer skills development, we're happy to give you a highlight of the work that NIPMO and WIPO CIPC have done, where the University of Limpopo hosted the annual WIPO South Africa Summer School on IP and tech transfer in Polokwane in November and December. The school focused on intellectual property and public health in the context of COVID-19 pandemic and also on future pandemic preparedness. We will be sharing with yourselves how we are pulling together different capacities in the institution to look at how we can have a center that focuses on future pandemics. 114 participants from 14 countries benefited from this work, and we are therefore very delighted about it. The minister officially launched the South African Green Hydrogen TVET Ecosystem Just Transition Strategic Framework Report on the 6th of December in Cape Town. And the TVET study is one of 5 subcomponents required to complete the Hydrogen Society Roadmap, which was launched in February 2022. The development of this TVET study started after the UK Partnering for Accelerated Climate Transition, UK PACT as it is called, program, launched 60 million euro flagship under its international climate finance portfolio to support green hydrogen job creation and from a just transition perspective, which has seen a benefit for South Africa. On the square kilometer array, the minister and the chair of the SKA Council, Dr. Catherine Sizarski, launched the on-site construction of the SKA telescope at the site on the 5th of December. This was, of course, signaling the start of the construction of the SKA. And the launch took place on the eve of the World Science Forum in Cape Town and gave the SKA excellent exposure to the Science Forum delegates. There was a widespread media coverage on this event. What we hope this launch and this start will do is will continue to start deploying stage deployment of 133 antenna that will be added to the 64 Dish-Meerkat telescope, which the committee will have seen. So it will be built at a cost of today's estimate 2.2 billion, and the indication is that hopefully by 2028, but Dan and I who sit in the council meeting think that would not be the case. The benefits that we are getting out of the SKA organization, we have, it has awarded approximately 889 million contracts to build the civil infrastructure, including power, fiber, and roads, to a South African-based company, Power Adenco, which will provide a range of subcontract opportunities and benefits to local communities. It is expected that up to 100 million will be spent on local SMEs, employment of local people, training and transferring of skills to local stakeholders, supporting local businesses and implementing community development initiatives in conjunction with the SKAO and SARAO. This contract is over and above the contracts that have recently been awarded to SARAO and South African companies such as Vivo, Zutari, and MCOM. Later on, Chair, I've asked Mr. Patel to just share with us the nature of the contracts that Vivo, Zutari, and MCOM have received. So unless if Imran is ready to do that now.
Good morning, DG. I can do that quickly. The Zutari and Vivo contracts are for infrastructure professional services, valued at 43 million and 86 million respectively. Both organizations are BE level 1 compliant, as well as Power Denko. They also BE level 1 status compliant. And then MCOM's contract, the smaller one, is for wireless radio network communications technology and services to the SKA site, and that's valued at 20 million rands. We were not able to establish the exact BE level because they're a very small company. It should be remembered that the selection of these companies are not South African done by us. They're done by the SKA organization, but we sit on the adjudication panel. Thanks, DG. I hope that's been helpful.
No, that's fine. What I still would recommend to the committee through you, Chair, and honorable members, is that perhaps we come and brief you on the benefits that we are already getting out of hosting the telescope. So we've also been, SARAO awarded a software development contract valued at 150 million. The total estimated value of contracts that have now been awarded to South African entities is 1.2 billion, and we expect further contracts. It is expected that the leasing of buildings to be constructed and the ongoing technical maintenance and operation for the next 50 years will deliver long-term sustainable foreign investments to South Africa. But as I said, Chair, we're just giving you highlights and indicating, as we have always indicated, that there are benefits that will accrue to ourselves as South Africa as a result of hosting SKA. SAPRIN, the South African Population Research Infrastructure Network, on the 14th of November released a working paper where they are measuring rural household and electricity access. And the paper is based on a study on access to electricity for rural households, featuring data triangulation with Statistics South Africa. On the 22nd, 23rd of November 2022, a SAPRIN director participated in the National Health Research Summit, where SAPRIN was promoted as an ideal conduit for the implementation of research to inform the implementation of the National Health Insurance to ensure equitable universal care. As a result, SAPRIN has been invited to make a presentation to the National Health Research Council at its first 2023 meeting. So again, the infrastructure that we have funded is really helping government to benefit from itself. We also want to just remind and be excited about the National Equipment Program that we've been running, that the review report made recommendations on strategic and operational matters to contribute to the transformation of the National System of Innovation by ensuring the equitable distribution of research equipment funds. So we hope that ourselves working with the NRF will look at this, and then the South African Research Infrastructure Roadmap, SARIR, the review covered the first 5 years of the initiative. Its main aim was to assess the effectiveness, progress, and rollout of the research infrastructure that has been launched since 2016. On the indigenous knowledge system, we are happy to report that the department in its pursuit of protecting, promoting, and developing the indigenous knowledge of South African communities, has established indigenous knowledge systems documentation centers across the 9 provinces of South Africa. We have, as a department, been working with the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research Next Generation Cluster that has also developed a technology tool called the National Indigenous Knowledge Management System to support the process of documenting, recording, and safeguarding a community's knowledge. To date, the DSI has trained over 60 unemployed young people in various provinces in qualitative data collection methods and technology usage to document the knowledge at these multiple centers. To improve the quality and efficiency of processes at various centers, the CSIR developed a new management system app to be deployed in all the provinces. And on the 14th to the 18th of October, the DSI and CSIR facilitated a 4-day capability building workshop in Thohoyandou for the Limpopo IKS Documentation Center team. This is just the breakdown of the male and female unemployed graduates, race or gender, and then the age as well. On the science diplomacy for economic development, Minister officially launched science diplomacy green hydrogen roundtables on the 6th of December last year on the sideline of the World Science Forum. The session was hosted with an international partner, Impact Hydrogen, and Stellenbosch University, which assisted with the logistics. The initiative is intended to directly support the implementation of both the Hydrogen Society Roadmap and the commercialization for South Africa through a series of local and international roundtable workshops and follow-up engagements. The presidency, on the other side, hosted a Green Hydrogen Summit, which gave an indication of progress made in implementing green hydrogen projects as part of infrastructure development. As part of the summit, we as a department coordinated 2 panel discussions and held an exhibition on innovations developed under the HySA program. We also facilitated site visits to the HySA centers of competence. We are very, very happy about this culture-led smart village pilot project, which is a project in collaboration with Tshwane University of Technology, the University of Venda, Northwest University, the Nyandeni Royal House, the Nyandeni communities, the Nyandeni local municipality, and the OR Tambo district municipality. This concept of a smart village will be based on the particular local communities, condition, infrastructure, available resources, local demand, and the potential to export goods to urban areas. So this is just a concept of what this mixed-use smart rural village look like. And we have, for instance, a community radio station, theater, and museum, which you can see there. IKS-led village shopping center and government offices, number 2. Indigenous Cultural Creative Industry Center, number 3. Mini Civic Square, Village Exhibition, Auction and Stock Exchange, Agricultural Hub, and so forth and so forth. So we're very, very excited about this concept of a smart village model that we are piloting. And this just indicates to you that in this smart rural village, you will have connected devices, connected homes, and some kind of intelligent cybersecurity, clean energy grid as a concept. So again, this is just a model of indigenous knowledge, smart-led, indigenous knowledge system-led smart village. And again, this is just the concept of some of the things that will be happening in the village. I'd ask Dr. Mope if at this stage you would like to add anything on this concept before I move on. Dr. Mope?
DG, I think it's program 4, which is on the smart village. Shumi is on the line if she wants to add anything. I think there was the UNESCO award that you may want to reflect on. Shumi?
Shumi?
Thanks, DG. Good morning, DG. Good morning, honorable members. Yes, we started this smart village on the backdrop of the disciplines that have been identified on the IK Act, with indigenous technologies and architectures being one of them. So we just wanted to test if we can be able to make this IK Act a living act. So we identified the indigenous technologies, but also we wanted to respond to the DSI's decadal plan, whilst we are also responding to the IK Act as well. So the thrust of this culture-led smart village is that it is an interdisciplinary project that will involve all relevant stakeholders, because we don't want to do it in piecemeal. So when we talk about this smart village, we need to consider the road infrastructure. We need to involve agriculture, the IT systems, as it was indicated earlier on by the DG, that there would be connectivity issues there. And we identified the most rural of communities who don't have access to the ordinary amenities like we do. That is why, for instance, we are talking about the mixed use buildings there, where we'll have your Department of Home Affairs, so that people don't have to travel to the cities for an ordinary piece of paper called the birth certificate. So we are trying to decentralize the economy so that the inner city collapse that we see on a daily, where people move from the villages to the cities in search of jobs and other amenities, is addressed at community level. We have young graduates who have graduated and they need to send their CVs and whatever else. For them to be able to do that, they need to travel to the towns, to the cities, to do only that function. So if we bring all of that to the communities, then we will have solved a number of issues: your joblessness, your inequality, and most importantly, the collapse of the inner city due to the influx. DDG did mention that we won a STAR award from UNESCO on the basis of the research that has been done in addressing the issues around the smart village. I think maybe one day we'll just have a whole session dedicated to the smart village, because I don't know how much time I have. Otherwise, I would go on and on, because we are so excited about this. We presented the concept at legislature in Bisho, and the legislatures were very excited about this, because it talks to the real issues of the triple challenges in South Africa. And we also presented this to the OR Tambo District Municipality, who also bought into the concept. And lastly, we presented this to the Nyandeni local municipality, who then decided to make this project part of their IDP strategy. And this year, 2023, they are going to present it as one of the provincial projects in Eastern Cape. So we also went through to the Royal House, and we received a letter of endorsement from King Damase, who saw a big benefit in this, because even where the Royal House is situated, the access to the Royal House is very bad. So if we're coming up with a project that seeks to address all those issues, access to health facilities, the roads are very bad. And on our television screens, we have seen people who cross rivers under very treacherous conditions, others even losing their lives. And the Smart Village, as a multidisciplinary project, seeks to address all of those. But most importantly, we want to use indigenous technologies in addressing all of this as one of our areas of geographical advantage in South Africa. So I will stop there, DG. Thank you very much.
No, thanks very much for the context and the work that I think the team does. So the Regional Space Weather Center is one of the activities where the center was officially opened in November 2022. And the space weather refers to the variable conditions on the sun and in space that can influence the performance of technology use on Earth. The center is recognized by the ICAO as Africa's only regional space weather information provider. As you know, the idea here is that there are so many communication devices that we have in space, and if there are solar flares or anything in space that could affect that communication infrastructure, you can imagine the impact it would have on our lives on a daily basis, whether it's satellite communication or navigation system. So it's extremely important to have such a capability. And we were then awarded, as you know, as SANZA, this responsibility of having this regional space weather. So we are delighted about the work that we've started. We also have been discussing with NASA, National Aeronautics and Space Administration Deep Space Network, which is a worldwide network of US spacecraft communication facilities that support NASA and non-NASA missions that explore the furthest point of our solar system. It also performs radio and radar astronomy observations to explore the solar system and the universe and support selected Earth orbiting missions. So NASA has partnered with SANZA, the space agency, to establish a ground station in South Africa in Matjiesfontein. And this new satellite ground station facility will be established for international deep space tracking as well as local use. Tracking national satellite missions, scientific research, and human capital development program are part of what this would be done. So just to again reiterate that the Space Weather Center and the Deep Space Network initiatives will contribute significantly to the Decadal Plan internationalization efforts and FDI, because we will receive some funding on this. And we are very excited about this National Biosecurity Hub, which is again part of modernizing agriculture. So together with the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development in October, we launched this joint National Biosecurity Hub. It's a significant advance in the development of our national system of innovation. So this hub is underpinned by a robust science-based regulatory and national response system, international norms and standards on risk assessment and management, and effective coordination of all role players, government, industry, and research. Essentially, what it does is it prioritizes plant and animal health matters, as well as food safety, and supports modernizing agriculture as part of the Decadal Plan. So essentially what you do here is you have data of the agricultural produce from production all the way up to the final destination. So if there's anything that the people you export to want to know, they will have the data that indicates exactly what happened in each part of the value chain. We facilitated virtual and physical information dissemination engagements to promote South African participation in South Africa EU funded programs, extending opportunities to participants in the rest of the continent. We also have had several other engagement opportunities that arose during the quarter, which included the CSIR Biannual Conference in November 22 at DUT and the Innovation Indaba in October 22. There were also other engagements with multinational private sector partners, such as ABP, South Africa, Bosch, amongst others. And we, together with DHET, partnered with Schneider Electric to conceptualize the trainer workshop to build capacity among engineering lecturers at TVET colleges. We also had the SA-EU Task Force meeting that took stock of cooperation in science and technology and delivers for implementation before the joint Science and Technology Cooperation Committee that will be held 23-24. And then the 5th SA-EU Joint Cooperation Council meeting was hosted in South Africa during the quarter. And we also co-chaired the International Bioeconomy Forum. The IBF plenary took place on the sites of the World Science Forum. The DSI presented the results of a study on the nature and scope of trafficking in persons, TIP, in South Africa at a workshop on the review of South Africa's national policy framework on TIP. The research provided critical new insights into the nature and scope of this trafficking in persons in South Africa, and through Science Diplomacy Capital for Africa initiative, the DSI hosted a Science Diplomacy for Social Justice working group during the World Science Forum. We also coordinated a session on making the most of quantum computers inclusively and openly to reach the SDGs and technology and social inclusion in the global south, which focus on the ways climate change is affecting food and the built environment, whilst considering measures for climate change adaptation, mitigation, and resilience building. We also participated in the annual convening of the Water and Energy for Food Grand Challenge, where 175 innovators from 6 regional innovation hubs in Africa, Middle East, and Southeast Asia came together to share and learn about innovation and enterprise in water, energy, and food nexus. So on the performance overview targets, Chair and honorable members, for the quarter, we achieved 68 targets and 32 were not achieved, and we'll go through the details, especially more on the non-achieved, but also our assessment as to whether, even though they were not achieved, what is the likelihood that these will be achieved by the end of the year. So per quarter, you can see in quarter 1, our performance in quarter 2, and then our performance in quarter 3. Only 2 out of 7, 1 out of 8 for program 4, and then program 5, 4 were not achieved. So this is just a quick rundown of which ones were achieved. The draft of the DSI public entities draft reports, this was achieved. And then this again just defines what program 2 does. Strategic and technical engagements in SANZA and TIA to ensure alignment. This was achieved. The youth that were engaged in these areas of outreach, awareness, and training, the target was achieved. And then new disclosures, again, 124 out of the target of 115. This is international cooperation. This is just a picture of the ministers' participation at the 7th Tokyo International Conference on African Development, Science, Technology, and Society Forum in Japan. These are the targets that were achieved in Program 3, 12 international resource leveraging engagements, international policy dialogues, and technical exchanges to support the policy intents of the white paper. 4 STI initiatives supporting Agenda 2063, 6 STI initiatives support the work that we're doing on SADC, 4 STI plans of action implemented with bilateral partners. 12 engagements with global science leader, 1 international STI initiative focused on SDGs supported by South Africa. On Program 4, we were able to support over 2,000 PhD students, 4,700 pipeline students broken down into BTech honors and master's students that were awarded bursaries, just over 1,500 emerging researchers awarded research grants through the NRF. Over 577 Black and female emerging researchers awarded research grants, the NRF. 933 graduates placed in DSI-funded work preparation programs in our institutions. Over 3,000 awarded research grants through NRF-managed programs. And we were able to have a target of L-band science mode receivers produced for the addition of the Meerkat extension. 3 bilateral engagements, again, were achieved with these entities, NRF, ASAP, and SACMAS. On program 4.5, knowledge products on innovation for inclusive development, annual work plans, decision support tools, systems approved, learning interventions hosted. And this is just a footnote to say what we mean by knowledge products, case studies, policy briefs, technology briefs, and research reports, and decision support interventions. It's about helping people think about choices they face, describe why choices exist, provide information about options, including where reasonable, the option of taking no action. In terms of statistical reports, we managed to achieve this target. So the targets that were not achieved in Q3, it's either process delays, and this refers to under and non-achievement due to factors outside our department, but we also work fairly closely with our stakeholders to understand this and try and put mitigating measures. Ineffective of implementers, this refers to the non-achievement due to deficiencies during the implementation phase, and sometimes our target formulation is not easy. Like when you say you will have 7 disclosures, it may be based on the previous performance and what you have promised, and then this may not be the case. So, but what we have done on the last column, Chair, after we looked at the targets that were not achieved and the reason, we've tried to estimate whether we'll still be able to achieve this target by the end of the year. So if we look at the platforms that we use to engage media, we did not achieve this. And the reason is that the 6th platform source data was rejected as it did not meet the TID prescripts. So we've looked at this. We are of the opinion that the annual target would still be achieved, technical indicated descriptor. On the space weather, the target was also not achieved. The reason is in early August, the program dedicated to the operational space weather services project passed away unexpectedly, but we've looked at whether we'll be able to meet the target. So we are satisfied that this will be achieved. And then on the number of trainees upskilled in intellectual property, the Technology and Innovation Support Center workshop was moved to February. So we are almost confident that this will be achieved. On the number of disclosures licensed for the first time received from publicly financed research and development institutions by NIBMO, this is only the 2nd year that this indicator has been tracked, and it is therefore on a learning cycle on our side, but the target has already been achieved if we looked at the information we received post the reporting period. On the South African students participating in international training programs, we did not achieve this because of the partners' reporting time frames, but we are confident that this will be achieved as most information will be available in the 4th quarter. On the capacity building initiatives for international cooperation, the reason is that the evidence for achievement for the indicator was inadequate. We are still uncertain if the target will be achieved, but we'll keep tracking this and update the committee perhaps in the 4th quarter. On the community participatory research projects, establish a public higher education universities. Again, this was not achieved. And the reason is that the NRF did not submit all the required progress report by the submission date. But preliminary evidence was submitted, and reports from the NRF were received 20 days after the end of the quarter. So we're working with the NRF on this target. We assume that it is likely to be achieved due to a synoptic report for all quarters that will be submitted in Q4. And then on the industrially relevant knowledge or innovation products added to the industrial development portfolio of IP, TR reports were received on the 21st of January and could not be verified before the cutoff date, but we think that the annual target will be achieved. On the annual workshops for 11 innovation support innovations that strengthen provincial innovation system, after a due diligence investigation of non-performing interventions, support for interventions in Northwestern Gauteng were terminated by the director because he picked up some issues that were linked to the contravening of the funding agreement, such as not providing reports for activities that they were supposed to implement. So we think that we will not going to meet this target, but we are looking at remedial action and working with the implementation partners on this. On the pre-approval decisions provided within 90 days, as the committee would know, we had an IT malware challenge, and this affected the R&D tax incentives. Data was lost, and the shared drive after this malware attack, and the emails were also not operational. So we had to ask some of the data back from the entities, so that has created delay. And as a result of this, we think that this target will not be achieved for the year. On 5 technical engagements with our entities, information on the CSR technical bilateral was only secured on the 24th of January. Again, just the information coming later than the time that is stipulated for submitting the information and verifying it, but we are comfortable that this target will be achieved. So I would now like to move to the financial reporting. I didn't see Robert. He had indicated to me that he is not well. Unless he is here, I am happy to start with the presentation, and then I'll ask if colleagues from finance would like to add anything. So this is our breakdown, 9.1 billion. It's broken down to 357.6 million for compensation of employees, 222 million, 8.5 billion that we transfer to our entities, and 11 million for payment of capital assets. So we had planned to spend 5.6 by the end of Q2, and the actual expenditure amounted to 4.5 billion, which is 50% of the budget. So we're happy that at Q2, 50%. And this, of course, translated to 19% variance on the amount that we hoped to do. So we're giving you this just so that the committee will see the trend. We know we are reporting for the Q3. So this is just an indication then of what we spent, where we should have been, and the variance of 1 billion rands. This is just the same information presented in terms of the compensation of employees, goods and services, transfer payments, and payment of capital assets. And you can again see that we were 10% out in terms of the compensation of employees, 9% out on the goods and services, on the transfer payments, 20%, and we were over by 55%. So again, this is the same information broken down in transfers and subsidies. So it's just a different way of presenting exactly the same information. Again, in terms of administration, the variances, I think, unless I'm mistaken, this is per program. So again, without going into the details of this, you can see how this was done per each of the program. The same information again presented in bar chart. So in Q3, we had planned to be at 7.5 billion by the end of the quarter, and the actual expenditure was 7 billion and 48 million, which translate to 77.1% of the total budget. after adjusting, and this translates to 451 million, 6% of the planned expenditure. And for the info of the committee, we had effected environments amounting to 479 million rands from slow spending activities to those that have shortfalls, and Parliament approved 393 million for environment, and National Treasury 175 million, and what is within the DG, it was 10 million, just to give you the breakdown of this. So again, out of planned expenditure of 7.57 billion was spent, and the 455, and again, in terms of the economic classification, again, you can see the actual breakdown and the variance with the compensation of employees being 4%, 2% on goods and services, 6%, and then overall 6% variance. Again, this is a different way of presenting exactly the same budget. This is per program, 4% on administration was a variance, 12% on program 2, program 3, 14, 2% and 11%, which translate to 6%, exactly the same information. So the reason for the variances on the compensation of employees is that the variance is due to the delays in filling of the prioritized positions, but the positions were advertised and are at different stages of recruitment. Recently at EXCO, we were told by HR that we are now within the 10%, which is a DPSA targets in terms of vacancies, but we still want to continue to get down to under 10%. So hopefully by the fourth quarter, we'll be able to provide you with an update. On the goods and services, the improved spending under goods is as a result of the payment in December of contracts that had not been concluded and paid as planned in the past. So we are making progress on the goods and services. On the transfers and subsidies, this is where a little bit of a challenge. And if the committee would remember that we had said we were embarking on a process to reduce cash reserves in entities. And we now have a policy that said, if you haven't spent 90% of your budget from the previous year, we will then not transfer the money for the following year. So we are in that process where there's still some slow spending by some of the entities, and we still get late submission of reports. So we're working with our entities to try and make sure that there is improvement on this. This is the breakdown between 1 July and 30th of September on the procurement expenditure on goods and services. So the total procurement was 21 billion, 11 million, spent on SMMEs, 17 on Black-owned companies, 8 on women-owned companies, and just under 4 for young-owned companies. And this is the breakdown in terms of the percentage. From 1 April to 31 December, it's 57 million. Again, it's broken down. 21, just under 30 for SMEs, 45 Black-owned companies, 23 on women-owned, and 8, and then the breakdown is given. So what we have done here is, again, we've tried to indicate where this money is being spent on the commodities, the women-owned companies, youth-owned companies, and then people with disabilities. And this is what the committee had requested us. And we are very much aware that we are not doing well on companies owned by people with disabilities. There was only 0.02% on the consultants that we spent 13,540 on. So we want to keep tracking this and see whether we can do a lot more. Again, this is the breakdown continuing on the different commodities. On recruitment and agencies, 0.9% on companies owned by people with disabilities. So this is the average number of days where we make the payment, and we compare 22-23 with 21-23. We seem to be averaging about 7 days to pay SMMEs and companies that will receive services from us, and this is the percentage of invoices that are paid within 30 days. But I'm not so sure, Chair, if Finance would like to say anything on the financial report. I think they are here. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm not so sure who from Finance is here. Anyone from Finance?
Morning, DG. I'm here. It's Andres.
Yes, Andres, please.
Maybe what I just need to add is on the people with disabilities. On the report, on the presentation, I think the information was only included on the commodities, but on the breakdown at the top of the presentation was not included, where we made a breakdown between SMMEs, Black-owned companies, women-owned and youth-owned. So the information should have been included there, but for the second quarter, the procurement spend on the people with disabilities was only 1.1%. And then for the third quarter, it was 0.3%. So this is still a challenge, like DG mentioned, and we're working with the various departments to address this challenge of underachieving on the people with disabilities. I think, yeah, let me end there for now. Thanks.
Thanks, Andres. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, DG. And thank you very much to colleagues from the department. Honorable members, this is then the presentation from the department. If I can note hands of members that would like to engage. On my side, I think I want to appreciate the concerns that DG has spoken to. And I think it will be, important for the committee to also support you in overcoming those particular challenges, like, on issues like data or reports that don't come to the department on time. That's very concerning. And I think as we go into this process of receiving the performance plans, it would be very important for us to flag that to the various entities as they come before the committee. And it's something that we generally are experiencing in both departments, where the department is struggling to report back efficiently because of entities that are delaying in sending them in the department information. I want to acknowledge that the decadal plan has been approved by cabinet, and colleagues have already started implementing various aspects of it. And this has been a big thing for the committee, right? The finalization of the decadal plan. And I think it's something that the Honorable Mapulane had kept his finger on the pulse on, and it's great that finally a significant stride has been made in this regard, and leaving the 6th Parliament and handing over to the 7th Parliament, the focus will be mainly on the implementation of the decadal plan. So this is really something that we must acknowledge as a committee. Of course, we want to make significant strides in guiding the kickstart or the kickoff of this plan. And then I also want to note some of the matters that DG has said should be presented to the committee as separate matters. So with the Secretariat, I think we have noted those issues, DG, and we'll see how we can then fit them into our program. I want to leave it at that for now. I'll come back a bit later, but let me take Honorable Mananiso and Honorable Sibia. Honorable Mananiso.
Okay, thank you, Chairperson. Please note that I have a problem with connectivity, so I won't be switching on my video. Chair, let me start by welcoming the presentation. And one must appreciate many strides that has been made from the department, and issues that we normally speak on, the issues of equity, equality, and social justice in terms of the sector. And I'm happy about the breakdowns that actually we could have done, we got today. And I hope that the department will maintain that every time we don't need, when we come to issues of target or beneficiaries, we are asking, give us the breakdown and so on. So they did well. Actually, I'm very impressed. And Chair, one must as well acknowledge the fact that on the issue of what has not been achieved, they are able to give us a committed plan to say that at least by the next term, they would be able to actually achieve that they didn't achieve. So we must actually recommend that, because I was going to ask to say, why are other plans not achieved and what is the plan? So I'm very pleased that I was covered by the presentation that they have a plan in terms of achieving whatever that they didn't achieve. Chairperson, we do acknowledge the fact that they are responding to issues indeed, because of we noting that there's increasing knowledge generation, and it will take our country far in terms of transformation in general. Chairperson, on the other issue that one would want to actually applaud the department, comrade, honorable members and DG Mjwara, is your publicity on CSIR innovation, that at least now we are able to, when we switch on our television, we are able to see that you actually taking publicity high in terms of actually feeding people what you have as a good story as a department. On the 14th of March, I was watching it. It's an episode that normally plays in terms of what are the innovation things that are happening and development in general. So I was happy that on that day they were actually interviewing the CSIR principal researcher, and the lady, she's still young, and she was so fluent in terms of what she was speaking about on innovation and safety and manufacturing. So these are the things that we actually want to see, that really in the space there's transformation in terms of other sex and so on. Chair, my other input that one would want to acknowledge from the presentation is the fact that the department is working so hard to ensure that the district development model is working. I am happy about what they have given us on the issue of Nyandeni on slide 21, about the inclusion of the municipality program of IDP. As they have included their program on their IDP. It really shows that in some municipalities, they do understand that this national service delivery, they don't operate at an helicopter level, but they can be integrated on their plan. So it's one of the things that we are actually noting and appreciating, that the sense that what this district model is all about. And Chair, as I conclude, I think on the issue of the decadal plan, I'm actually covered by you to say that it's one of the things that we indeed must pride ourselves that at least we have traveled miles and we have actually achieved what we wanted to achieve. And it will be nice to see, taste and feel whatever that this particular decadal plan will bring to the county, so that we don't leave anyone behind. And Chair, I want to say to the department, let them continue doing what they do best in terms of good performance and good governance. We are watching them, and we hope that where they are not doing well, they need to advance. And lastly, as I conclude, Chairperson, noting what DGF said with regards to issues of people with disabilities, I just want to say, maybe in this term that we are left with as the 6th Parliament, can they perhaps touch ground on special schools where they can get young people in those special schools to integrate them on their programs of advocacy or civil education for science and innovation, so that at least when they meet with us, they are able to tell us to say, in this part, this is what we are doing, and in partnership with private sectors, so that we take everybody along, because it's good to appreciate that the department says that they actually don't have much to say about people with disabilities, but as well, it is important to say this is what we think that we can do with other issues to cover the inclusion of people with disability. So that's it from me, Chairperson, and thank you to the whole team for the presentation that it's so comprehensive.
Thank you, Honorable Mananiso. Honorable Sibia, you had your hand up. Okay, she's saying connectivity issues, so her hand is down. Can I check any other members who would like to make remarks? Okay, I see Honorable Chirwa. Honorable Chirwa can come in.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I apologize if there's a bit of noise. But busy or something, and so thank you for the presentation, DG. I just have a few clarity-seeking questions. Firstly, on the SKA, I want to know how exactly will local companies be supported, and what kind of jobs and how many jobs, because it sounds a bit vague, but it feels, there's a feel that you guys have figured it out, but it's not displayed in how you speak about these particular aspects. So if you can just clarify us on that, I think that would be great. And I also want to find out why head office SKA ingekho lana nalana in South Africa or bangayenzi in other side. And I'm asking this because the impression given is that we are equal stakeholders, right? But you see it in small things that actually we are not. And I think it's important to be absolutely transparent in what exactly this partnership is for the country as well, and in what capacity we are being stakeholders in, instead of just, overestimating our participation or overestimating our contributions, because it comes off like that, even on things like the selection of companies that we are not involved and stuff like that, So I'm obviously curious because the impression given is that we are equal stakeholders, but the evidence suggests otherwise. So please kindly just clarify that particular issue, because it's and I think I've asked on the issue of the head office to the minister, and sadly he was not necessarily forthcoming on that. But I think you'll be able to just clarify me on that. But if the DG can hear the sentiment to which I'm coming at, that would be great. It's just really climbing on, wanting to understand, are we as equal stakeholders as we're made to believe, or as this is presented, or the truth is otherwise. And on the indigenous knowledge registration system, which is a great initiative, I want to know what kind of knowledge is stored in these systems. If you can just take us through the process of it, the validity, the legitimacy, all of those tenets that just justify this thing of basically what kind of knowledge is stored. I think, Chairperson, we might even need an entire presentation on this particular thing, because it is a very vital thing. It would be in a great move to just find out more about this indigenous knowledge registration system, how it works, and stuff like that. And then lastly, I'm outside of the targets and everything else, I think I've shared my sentiments so many times on the issue of targets not being reached, and the pretense to be shocked when targets are actually not reached at the end, even though we saw the trend even now. I want to find out on this thing of spending on companies owned by people with disabilities and women and youth. It's actually very concerning, DG, to be quite honest with you. And I'll give you an example just to give you how concerning it is, right? It is similar to a white man telling black people that, no, you who is in a position of power, by the way, to make these decisions to ensure that they come into fruition, and then coming and saying, we just didn't do well on companies owned by people with disabilities, and that didn't do well is at 0%. I'm a bit concerned on this because, and I've said it before as well, this is bigotry, and we're not calling it what it is, because in the executive, these people are not represented adequately to begin with. And then even on tenets that have to do with empowering and acknowledging their equal participation economically in the industry, in the department, still nakhona nyaba sideliner. And the only accountability or the only thing you have to say about that is that, we didn't do well on this particular thing. There has to be more. There has to be more remedial action done. Like, what are you going to do about the fact that you guys are not doing well on doing things that you're meant to be doing? This is supposed to be the most common and basic tenets that represent the department. Like the fact that we're getting numbers like 20% on money spent on young people in a department that is primarily flooded by young people is really concerning. And even from how you guys are, deliberating on it, there is no deep-seated concern or urgency. This is how we are planning to remedy it. By the end of next month, we would have made sure that there is none of that. It's just the same old feeling of despondency that and then life goes on. But it shouldn't be like that, because it's a very deep thing, and it's wrong. It cannot be tolerated. There should be a zero tolerance on ableism. There should be zero tolerance on the isolation of people with disabilities in the department. Zero tolerance, like no tolerance at all. There should be consequences when there isn't enough work done to source out partners that represent this particular cohort and constituency. And obviously that work is not being done, because if it was being done, then it would have reflected in what you're showing to the committee, and it's not. So I want to find out from the DG, what happens now? Like, what happens now? And then come back, because this is a consistent thing. In 2023, in 2022, 2021, this is how you work. This is how the department looks like when it comes to addressing issues of this nature. And it can't be acceptable. Like, what is the consequence management of this particular thing? What are you going to do that you've spent nothing on companies owned by people with disabilities? Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Chirwa. Can I note any other members who would like to make an input? Okay. All right. On my side, I also want to add there are a number of reviews, DG, that colleagues had said they would, once they've briefed the minister on them, then they'll bring them to the committee. And in your slides, you speak to, I think it's slide 13. Sorry, let me just check. There are two reviews there. The National Equipment Program and the South African Research Infrastructure Roadmap. If you could kindly send us the full review, and then if time allows, maybe we can get like full-on updates on them. But in the meantime, can you just send us I'm assuming there would be a report of some sort. If you could send us that, please. And also, I think there was one on the department structural, on the review of the department structure. So the department structural review, where are we in terms of that? And I guess we would want to be updated in relation to that. If I missed it in the presentation, I'm sorry. And then, yeah, I think, what Honorable Chirwa was speaking to is something that we've been concerned about for a long time, right? Because we've all agreed that our focus now with DSI is impact. It's impact, it's transformation, it's science that's for the people, by the people, with the people. It's science that responds to the socioeconomic needs of our country. And you can only do that if you're inclusive. And you know, DG, that we've been concerned about our inability to meet some of those targets. And that's why we've said science engagement is so important. But I do want to say that on the SKA and the IKS, we did do oversight visits there, where I think we got a greater sense of the relationship of the SKA in South Africa as a component of the SKA Observatory of SCOW, and its relationship in terms of the communities that it finds itself within. But the work in terms of that can never be enough, DG, right? We all agree on that there's a long-term plan in terms of the impact that the SKA in South Africa should be having, and even our vision on how influential South Africa must be and how integral a role South Africa must play in the advancement of the SKAO, right, across the world or across the globe. I mean, look, the other day we were having a bilateral as the South African Parliament with the Swedish Parliament, or various. It was a delegation that had members from different committees, and we had a lot to share in terms of so what they would call a tier. There's another name for it, I've just forgotten it now. And then we also spoke about the SKA and how I think there's a particular agreement that they've not signed, but they have started SKA type of work through one of their universities. And I was saying there, like, if you guys want to learn a thing or two, come to South Africa, and I'm not joking, DG. I mean it. I mean that, South Africa must be found with all the capacity that we've displayed through the SKA and the massive contributions that we've made as a country, given our geographic advantage. It would be very important that we find ourselves leading the expansion of the SKAO across the globe. So there's an opportunity there in Sweden. We must not be overlooked. But we do know, we have received some briefings in the past, Honorable Chirwa, of some of the work that they're doing there. But I think it would be important, Shanaz, that we send Honorable Chirwa some of those reports and presentations as well, given the fact that she does serve in 2 committees. So she's not always able to be with us here. And that would be the same with the IKS, where, we've even had cases where we said, we don't want to hear from the department anymore about beneficiaries of IKS projects or those who are depositing into the repository, the various repositories across the country. We want them to come to the committee and share with us, the work that they're doing with the department, even on IKS innovations. So those presentations, if they can please be sent to Honorable Chirwa. But DG, I'm not responding on your behalf. You still need to answer the questions that Honorable Chirwa has asked. Even though we also did get some inputs from the colleagues at UKZN who are part of 6 at UKZN. But it's a very important part of our work, DG. You know how passionate and committed the committee has been about the implementation of the IK Act. Since when we came into Parliament, it had just been passed, right? So our role was to bring that act into fruition. And now, we've had concerns, for example, around how that type of work, the protecting and promoting and capturing of indigenous knowledge systems was continuing throughout COVID and everything that was happening in terms of traditional medicine. And you and your department, DG, brought us into confidence that you have been trying to find mechanisms during COVID to continue doing that important work. But yeah, so we have received some of those presentations, and we have done oversight in those two spaces. But we do acknowledge that Honorable Chirwa does serve in two, maybe more committees. And so can we please share that information with her? And DG, if you can just share, respond to some of the questions that she has asked. I want to then also, yeah, so I've asked about the two reviews. And then in terms of SANSA, we I think we're supposed to be briefed on the management and governance stability of SANSA. Maybe let me say management in particular, because we're speaking about the office of the CEO. And I think that office has been filled, and if DG can just brief us on that. But I've also came to learn that they are, yeah, it's not all hunky-dory. Yeah, DG, if you can just bring us into confidence, what has happened there in particular, so that we are just brought into confidence in terms of the state of management at SANSA. And then in terms of, and I might have missed this, DG, and I apologize if I've missed it, the recruitment of the DDG for Program 2, if you can just give us an update in that regard. And I'll leave it at that for now. Yeah, if there's anything else that I'd like to come back on, I'll speak to it a bit later. But I think for now that should be fine. So those are the questions from members, DG, comments, questions, recommendations, issues around targets and meeting our targets, issues around transformation and impact, issues around inclusivity, the reviews. Yeah. So over to you, DG.
Thank you, Chair. And thanks to the honorable members for insightful questions, which we always appreciate, and glad to respond to. I just want to perhaps request some of the DDGs to talk about a couple of things. I want to start at the high level, if you don't mind. This issue of the public engagement, as mentioned by yourself, Chair, and where we are as far as institutionalizing that at the level that is for the system as a whole. Maybe Imran can talk about the recent engagement we've had with the NRF and the new approach to public engagement. So maybe we can just share that with yourself. Maybe he could also remind the committee on a work in progress on our transformation framework, which we have shared with you, and it's a work in progress, and it's got 7 dimensions to transformation of the NSI. Maybe remind the committee of the different elements of the framework, and perhaps when we would be ready to come and share where we are, because we're working with our entities to collect the data on each of the different dimensions of the framework. And then I would be happy to say a few words about the decadal plan and the impact, and just whet your appetite on when you go to the movies, there's something at the beginning that is called forthcoming attractions. Just whet your appetite to come back next time. So just 2 what we call forthcoming attractions. And then on the SKA IKS information, we will try and give Honorable Chirwa responses to some of the issues that was raised. And maybe I'll ask Dan to talk about the head office the establishment of the SKA as a intergovernmental body, and how the governance of the SKA, if you like, describes how members work within that IGO, including how in the manner in which we make our contributions, we actually get the fair work return, so that when we talk about some of the contracts that we indicated today are coming, what they are. If Imran wants to add anything about the IKS documentation centers and exactly the knowledge that is stored, the validity and the legitimacy, and just broadly how the IKS centers work, would be more than happy to do that. And then if Andres from finance want to talk about the issue of how we are trying to increase the number of youth companies, Black-owned, women-owned companies, and people with disabilities, and the awareness programs and the program to reach out so that we provide the training so that we can increase the number of companies that we procure services from. Maybe you could say a few words about that. We are happy, Chair, to provide you with the reviews on the SARER and NEP. Shokuku will be able to do that. Of course, there are others, and as soon as the minister has processed those, such as the Technology Innovation Agency, the NRF, as well as the South African Space Agency. I don't think if there's a miscommunication about the review of the departmental structure, that is a work in progress. As honorable member would know, we are having a service provider that is looking at the decadal plan now that is completed. And then to say, now that we have that document, which in a sense is our strategy following the white paper, what is the structure that you need to enable that? So we don't have that yet. It's a work in progress. We will share that with yourselves at an appropriate time, of course, through the minister. And then we're happy to come back to share with the committee on the broad socio-economic impacts of the SKA. What I would like to do, if Dan would like to do that, and Imran can talk about the methodology within which we look at the benefits of the SKA within the area where it's located. What we do is we have a register of SMMEs in the area, and we had shared with the committee the breakdown of the benefits that are accruing to the SMMEs in the area, as well as the other social benefits that we are working with the communities and the mayors and the district offices around how SKA can transform the area. For an example, we've just signed off and approved two things: the Science Center in Carnarvon. We have signed a broad astro-tourism strategy for the area, working with the local and provincial structure, and the benefits that are going to accrue out of that. As the committee knows, we are training young people, and we now have 1 or 2 graduates that have been trained in data analytics and in astronomy in the area. We're happy to provide what we have to Honorable Chirwa, but we would also be happy to share with yourselves as the committee at an appropriate time where we are on the SKA now, especially now that we are ready for the construction. I don't know. I like the idea of special schools advocacy in the schools, people with disabilities, if Imran wants to say a few words about that. And then we appreciate the smart village and its inclusion in the IDP, and the fact that if committee remembers, we have a full suite of our interventions and the impact they are likely to have in the DDM model and our contribution. So maybe we note that. So if that's fine, Chair, I think I've covered most of the issues that have been raised. And again, we are always encouraged by the comments of things that we are doing well on. And we are always excited to hear about things that you would like us to improve on. So as a generic point, I'd like to acknowledge that. So let me then say a few words about the issues you've raised at SANZA. And I want to talk about the ones that are official, not the unofficial one, Chair. The first one is the new board, as you know, has been appointed. The new CEO has been appointed, starting on the 1st of April, and it's not an April full stroke. And then the SANZA had proposed to the minister a new structure for the space agency. We then have been working with the space agency to advise them on how to move from the old structure to the new structure. The old structure is still in place because the new structure, even though the minister has approved it, it has to be signed off by Treasury, because after you approve the structure, then National Treasury has to see how the budget that has been allocated based on the old structure is going to look like. It's called the budget structure review. That process hopefully will be completed in June, July, and then hopefully SANZA will then implement the new structure. But because it will be right in the middle of the financial year, we would advise them perhaps to implement the new structure in the new financial year. So, and then lastly, we have completed, as I've indicated, the review of the space agency. We are now going through the process of management response and the board's response to the minister and finalizing that. So at an appropriate time, we will come and share that with you. And then on program 2, we still don't have a DDG, but we are looking at an interim arrangement which we will share with yourself as soon as that has been finalized. So maybe Mr. Patel, on the 3 issues, if you want to add anything on the IKS development centers, on the transformation framework and where we are, and then on the science engagement program and where we are. And if done, could come on the choice of the SKA as a head office, the intergovernmental organization framework, and being members of the and how the choice and the bidding led to us hosting the part of the telescope. Maybe that would help in providing the context for some of the things that we're doing. And if Mr. Patel wants to add anything on the local companies that we have supported, if he could do that. And then I will come back on the issue of the decadal plan highlights, is what I call what they say in the movies, forthcoming attractions. Chair, you wanted something?
Yeah, I'm saying, you know, on some of these matters, right, as we respond, so I think it will be important in our planning, right, more than anything. So I think some of these matters, let's try and package them effectively and succinctly for when we come back in the second term, to say, you know, the committee has consistently raised X, Y, and Z, and we want to, and thus we are incorporating it into our planning, our plans for this, you know, for the coming year. So that, yeah, so because these are continuous concerns. So like on science engagement, it's a linkage we're making to say, if we are not meeting certain targets, science engagement becomes an effective tool to use to help us meet some of the targets that we need to meet in terms of inclusivity and transformation. Because as we've said in the past, that we're at this juncture, right, where persons with disabilities will say to us, we're not getting opportunities, government is not giving us opportunities, we have great ideas, and then we see an outcome that says, we didn't meet a certain target, ganjani, and then there's that disjuncture. But so what I want to recommend is that some of these matters, can we please package them for them to be incorporated into the briefings we're going to get on the plans of the department going into the next financial year.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. That should be easy because we will be soon sharing with you the APP of the department, and we will extract, I think, those issues as part of the ongoing work, but under a framework of how we intend to address them over time. Thank you very much for the advice. But Mr. Patel, IKS Public Engagement Transformation Framework and where we are.
Thanks, TG, and thanks to the members for the questions. I think the chair has also guided that we'll come back around some of these matters in the context of our plans. But on public engagement, I think the key point to highlight is that we finalized a engagement, science engagement is the word that we use as opposed to public engagement, a science engagement strategy. I would consider very well developed. It took us a few iterations to really think about that, and hopefully we can share a copy of the actual strategy with members. And this was finalized, I think, in 2017. And what we had agreed as an executive committee at the time was that the strategy, which is grounded around different publics, there's about 11 publics that have been identified. In the past, it was clear that we had discrete programs focusing on young people, on learners. For example, we didn't tap into engagement with industry, with workers, etc. There were a number of people, when we thought about public engagement and learning from how other countries have grappled with the same issue, we came up to a set of 11 publics. And so the engagement strategy then identifies that, including with community members through things like town halls, etc., where things like the World Science Forum has come up. And that was approved. But there were two things that we needed to do to take that forward. The first was to firm up an institutional arrangement to be able to drive that in a proactive, systematic way, because the team in the DSI is like 3 or 4 people. You need a proper institution. And we had SASTA at the time, but SASTA was very much run around events. They helped us tremendously in ensuring that we pull off successful things like the National Science Week, etc. But in terms of being a custom built to take forward the science engagement strategy with its 11 publics required a slightly different institution. So then we worked with Parliament to modify the NRF Act to make this an embedded responsibility of the NRF, and then to empower and enable SASTA to be the agency that will drive this science engagement strategy more broadly defined than driving a set of activities. And now that is in place, has been a change in the leadership of SASTA. There's a new head of SASTA, and they have come to the DSI and presented an expansion plan, some of the new skills that they need to bring in, etc., and how do they build onto the current structure. So that's part one. And then the second part is that we have taken a decision to ring-fence a certain percentage of our funding, specifically for science engagement, and to be able to do it in a way that we can track what we're investing and what our outcomes and where we're getting that to, including, for example, doing a much more comprehensive, and that survey is underway. And you will see this when we present our plans. In the course of next year, we'll be doing a first of its kind detailed study on science awareness amongst the community. So the elements are now in place, and pretty much 2023-24 is beginning to transition in terms of getting SASTA capacitated and built up, sorting out the funding issues, etc. So that progressively over time, this is not a what insubstantial problem to address. We're talking about reaching every person in South Africa in very different ways. We need to up our game. People need to understand not only what is science, but also what is it that we're doing as a country, etc. So those efforts are in place, and there are already immediate areas where we've already strengthened. For example, there's a lot more engagement with the private sector in things like science meet business engagements, looking at issues ranging, and you could see this with the ChatGPT and others, ASAF beginning to run these awareness programs and having the conversation around science. So that's the pub science engagement strategy. And we hope that we now have some of the much more solid foundations in place to take what we have forward. We have successes we can share, but this is aimed at taking us a lot more forward in a much more significant way. So you'll notice when we come to future briefings that there'll be a lot more feedback provided around some of the interventions and initiatives that we're taking forward. The transformation framework, DG, it's actually 10 dimensions. I mean, there are some that are, at the moment, they are part of the framework, but we will focus on them at some other points in time, including looking at the kind of knowledge production and decolonizing and localizing that. There's a lot of global debates around this, some very interesting work that I'm being exposed to around that in other places. But clearly the big ones, the big dimensions that we're focusing on in the initial period is on the knowledge workforce, the people who are producing the knowledge in South Africa and the technology in South Africa, and gathering some of the data to understand exactly where we are. In some areas, we've been fairly successful. So there's a lot of variability in different fields of study, so we're looking at that. The second dimension that we're focusing on is the one about who benefits from the kind of technology investments that we're making. And in some instances, we have some good data, which I think we need to lift out and share. So, for example, through our programs, like the Technology Stations program, those programs, in fact, their beneficiaries are entirely, in some instances, young people, or they have a very strong portion towards women, as an example. The disability issue, I contend, is something we need to focus on. And as I'm thinking about this, I think there are some things we are doing, but maybe we need to scale that up and do a much more comprehensive assessment around some of those areas. So we're hoping to finalize that pretty soon. I mean, I think the framework is there. It's just getting some of the data and being a bit more specific about what is it that we would do in specific instances. Around the disability issue, I think the slides we present in these presentations, and I think, DG, this is something we have to possibly have more specific, not talk about transformation in the context of different things like the procurement. So in the procurement, yes, there was 0%. But in other instances, there are, when it comes to knowledge production, or for example, even looking at how is it that we support the technologies that would support people with disabilities. There's been quite a lot that's been done around people with hearing disabilities. You know, there's technologies using apps, etc. That's been, and we haven't properly consolidated that. And the idea with the transformation framework is to actually paint a much more comprehensive picture on how is it that we are impacting on people with disabilities either people with disabilities directly being empowered to be a much more a dynamic part of the knowledge system, but also in terms of the technologies that assist. As I'm talking here, I'm very keen to initiate some work with the CSR to look at some of the technologies that we develop for blind people. Where are they at? Are they in the market? Are they commercialized? So that we can, in fact, produce a much more comprehensive view. So I think, DJ, we are going to our session next week. Maybe this is something that we should pull together a report that shows how we impacting in its complexity, so that we don't pick up on one or two things and make a judgment on whether we are doing enough for people with disabilities or not. I can't say. I think there are things that we are doing that we're not surfacing, and there are things that we need to do better at it. But maybe we can put together a kind of an audit in the course of the year and use that to even shape our next 5-year strategic plan. There's SK, I'll wait for Dan to address those questions. On the local companies, just the one comment to make is that we are using some methodology that has been developed by people looking at the impact of research infrastructures. There's a lot of global work on this because, you know, people invest billions of rands in things like CERN and SKA, etc. And the OECD, for example, has developed very detailed methodologies on how to quantify the full benefits of things like CERN and SKA, etc. So at the moment, we're using some of that methodology to produce the first kind of comprehensive report on the impact of the SKA to date. Meerkat mainly is the one. I wasn't aware the question would come up, so I can't remember exactly what's the date that we had agreed that that report would be completed, but it's quite advanced. It's supposed to be finished, I think, in the next few months. And I think, DG, that's where you said that when that report is completed and we've processed it, we can then come back to the committee with the full report and then do a proper presentation on the multiple dimensions of how SKA has impacted on the science, on human capital development, on our African relations, on socioeconomic development, on learners, etc., through programs that we initiated in Carnarvon, etc. And then the IKS register, I should have started with this earlier, but DG, maybe you can give Shumi a chance to come in after Dan and others have spoken, just to talk about what exactly is in these documentation centers, what kind of information we are collecting. I think it's mainly indigenous knowledge around around plant species, etc., so that by capturing it, we can protect it later. But Shumi can give more details on it. Thanks. I hope I've provided adequate responses to the questions. Thanks, DG.
Thanks, Imran. Dan?
Thank you very much, DG, and good morning, Honourable Chair and Honourable Members. And thank you for this opportunity to respond to the very pertinent comment which the Honourable Chirwa made, and that's why it's so important for South Africa not to be more than an equal partner in the SKA partnership. And I'll do that by just reflecting on the importance of that statement. Then, as the DG had requested, why intergovernmental, why international collaboration is so essential for the success of the SKA, and then just reflect on some of the measures which ensure that South Africa is indeed more than an equal partner. Indeed, the philosophy which underpinned our government's decision now 20 years ago to be involved in the SKA partnership was always that Africa would not only host the telescope, but that African scientists would lead the science to be done with the SKA, and that we saw through our significant investment in human capability for astronomy in South Africa, that African engineers would play a leading role in the design and the construction of the SKA, and we see that now being happened, but also that African policymakers, that African government, the South African government, would play a leading policy role in the SKA partnership. And indeed, the Honourable Chair mentioned the engagement with Sweden, and indeed Sweden's own progress towards full membership of the SKA of Observatory really involves critical contributions from South Africa from a diplomacy and policy perspective. So, of course, the SKA is the flagship frontier science project for the 21st century. It will be constructed through different phases, but for this very first phase, depending on the final design, which will be concluded, we see a total construction cost of more than 40 billion rand. And in addition to this, over the next 50 years, it will see annual investment in operational costs of more than R1 billion. So this is clearly a project which no country can do on its own, and it's absolutely dependent on international cooperation. And that required a negotiation of a convention, which established the intergovernmental organization, the SKA Observatory, which governs the project, and which also included the identification of what we refer to as the global headquarters, to be located in the United Kingdom, also in recognition of the United Kingdom's very significant investment in the SKA project. And I think it's also important on this occasion just to recall and again express our appreciation to the members of this committee, to whom we had presented on several times on the SKA convention, and then which also facilitated its ratification by the South African Parliament, which allowed the convention to enter into force. So indeed, it is a global partnership, and South Africa is the host of the telescope with Australia, but we are more than an equal partner, and also we have consistently and concertedly sought to ensure through the different governance procedures to ensure that South Africa derives maximum benefit from our participation in the project, as my colleague Mr. Patel highlighted. And I just want to mention 3 examples. The Director General mentioned that the procurement policy of the SKA Observatory rests upon the principle of fair work return. And this means that countries receive benefits in terms of industrial participation. In other words, the number of contracts allocated to the companies aligned with their contribution, their investment in the project. And of course, as a host country, our contribution is significant. And we have paid very careful attention in the different governance structures of the SKA to ensure that return on investment is more than equal, not only from a financial, from a monetary perspective, but also from the nature of the work. It was crucial for us to ensure that we also position South African companies in the knowledge, the technology intensive work, so that our participation in the SKA, yes, contributes to employment creation, including in the Northern Cape, but also, for example, supports our ambitions as set out in the decadal plan for the digital economy in South Africa. But secondly, the actual governance decision-making in the SKA, we also included, when we negotiated the convention, a provision of weighted voting for many decisions in the SKA countries. It's one country, one vote, but for the crucial financial decisions, it's weighted voting, and those voting is favored in favor of the host countries, South Africa, Australia, and the UK, because of our important investment in the project. And that ensures us very much a decisive input into decision-making in the SKA. And then lastly, we also have several South Africans playing important leadership roles in the SKA Observatory. Not least, just 2 weeks ago, the CFO of the National Research Foundation, Mr. Bishan Singh, known to this committee, was elected as the chair of the very influential SKA Observatory Finance Committee. So South African leadership is very strong throughout the project. And just to conclude, Honourable Chair, I'm sure you would be proud of us, hopefully, that we had hosted the German Minister of Higher Education and Research this week. We took her to the site on Tuesday, and she was highly complimentary in her comments on this not being a leading global science project, but a leading global science project which is being led by African. So that South African and African dimension and leadership in the project is respected and recognized across the globe. Thank you, Honourable Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dan. Chair, what Dan doesn't say is that he's a deputy chair of the SKAO Council. We serve, of course, on the board and influence how the decisions are being made. So we're very comfortable that we are not just bystanders and just taking instructions. In fact, about 30% of the team that built the Meerkat, they are now jointly appointed to be part of the design and the final construction designs and start the construction of the SKA. So we're very well. But as we said, Chair, we're more than happy at an appropriate time again to give you the latest developments in the SKA and then the broad benefits. I'm not so sure whether we are able from finance to talk about the initiatives that we are putting in place in order to address the not so good numbers we're intending, Andres, on the procurement. I take Imran's point that yes, the things that we're doing from the science, NSI on people with disabilities, but just focusing on the procurement, I am aware that there are awareness programs in order to increase the participation of the groups that are not where we would like them to be. And then if maybe DDG Zwane wants to comment about the targets not being met broadly and how we are addressing that, then I'll come back on the forthcoming attractions on the decadal plan implementation. Andres?
Okay, thanks, DG. What we've done to address some of the shortcomings with regards to the targets that are not met on procurement, we've engaged the Department of Women, Youth and Persons with Disability and also Social Development for them to provide information on those categories so that we can encourage those companies to register on CSD so that in future we can be able to procure from those. But for now, we've not received any information in addition to what is on the centralized supplier database, which there's only few service providers for companies which are owned by persons with disabilities on CSD. So what we've done is to engage the sector departments for them to provide the information so that we can encourage those service providers to register on CSD. But we have not been successful so far. Thanks.
Thanks, Andres. DDG Zwane, on trying to work closely with the entities and also ourselves to try and make sure that the information is provided on time for the reporting, because if you look at the targets that have not been met, a lot of them sometimes is because we got the information, but it cannot be included in the report because either it came late and or it could not be verified so that it can be included in the report. But maybe DDG Zwane may wish to say a few words on that because it was mentioned. And then I will come back on the forthcoming attractions and hand over back to the chair. DDG Zwane.
Thank you, DG. Good afternoon, Chair, and good afternoon, honorable members. I would not switch on my laptop. I am load shedding currently. Apologies. In terms of the targets that are not being met, one of the things that we've identified as well is that there might be an issue around the interpretation of the technical indicator descriptors in terms of what is it that needs to be submitted as the portfolio of evidence. We are tightening that and also kind of like doing an awareness campaign around the TIDs. This will also include the timelines. because previously what we've done sometimes is to allow people to submit a bit late, and we have had the risk of sometimes information being changed after it has been accepted and signed off and logged, which gives us a risk of getting findings. So in order for us to avoid that, we've been quite strict around the submission times and making sure that whatever has been submitted has been signed off by the DDGs and the programs concerned, and we are all aligning. So that is why we are finding ourselves with targets that have not been met, though we may say they are met, but because there's no portfolio of evidence that was submitted on time, they are recorded as unmet. Those are all the things that we're tightening in terms of the timelines and how then the programs need to honor those and how then they would sign off. But definitely when we come back to report next time, like Honorable Chair said, we would also be quite detailed in terms of how we're addressing those issues around performance information. Thank you, DG.
Thanks, DDG. Shumi, you would like to come back on the IKS documentation centers? It's a request that came from Honorable Chiro, what they are.
Yes, DG, thank you very much. Honorable members, you will recall that the IKS policy was adopted in 2004, and one of the imperatives of the IKS policy was the establishment of the office, the National Indigenous Knowledge Systems Office within DSI. And Chapter 8 of the IKS policy talks to the IKS centers and the databases. So it calls for South Africa to establish appropriate regulating mechanisms which can develop protocols and codes of conduct on the documentation and use of IKS resources. So in pursuit of that, we started by doing an audit around 2008 to find out if there were any pieces of information or metadata somewhere in our institutions where Indigenous knowledge is documented. And the lack of those prescripts and information led us to quickly establish IKS documentation centers in the provinces. So the methodology and standards that are used in that are meant to harmonize with other international systems so that we do proper cross-referencing. So we established IKS documentation centers in the provinces for another reason, that the Department of Science and Innovation is only a national department. So we don't have a footprint in the provinces. So it was then eminent for us to quickly establish these IKS documentation centers. So we then approached the traditional leadership so that they understand and agree that this is a project that is worth doing. After getting all those endorsements and approvals, we started with the process of establishing steering committees who are going to serve as the point of reference in verifying the authenticity and the validity of the information that the recorders are getting from the communities. So the knowledge that is recorded is community information, is community knowledge and knowledge associated with their genetic resources. So we create a catalog, and then the IK recorders who are part of the community then record the knowledge. And what the DSI did was to supply them with laptops, cameras, so that as they record this, there is information that can be validated later and verified. So the function then of the steering committee would be to quality check the information that has been given by that individual who has been appointed or nominated by the community to be recorded by the IKS recorders. As I indicated, this is communally owned information. So after that, the knowledge is verified and then it is classified. If it's knowledge that relates to medicines, it will be classified as such. If it's information that relates to food, it will be classified as such, and many other information codes that are available. So the information as we speak now is stored in our documentation centers. However, in the IK Act, there is a clause that talks to registration of indigenous knowledge. So I want us to understand that these are two processes. There is documentation process that happens at local level, at the level of communities, and there is registration that happens at national. So once this information is stored in the documentation centers, then based on whether it meets the eligibility criteria as proposed by the Act, it will then be put in the registration system. So the registration system itself is going to be that hub that holds all the knowledge that is in the eligibility, that meets the eligibility criteria. And the purpose, most importantly, of this is that this registration system must provide and enhance innovation capacity. Also bearing in mind, of course, the protection mechanisms of indigenous knowledge, so that we try to curb the biopiracy that has been troubling the communities since time immemorial. And the thrust of this registration system is that it must trigger the legal prescripts that either deny or allow access to the information. So the registration system itself will have two levels of access: the open access and the confidential access. So in the open access, it's just general information about the community and the demographics and all of that. But once the third party is interested in the information that is in the confidential space, then the legal prescripts will kick in, which will include your benefit sharing agreements, your non-disclosure agreements, your material transfer agreements, and any other relevant legal prescripts. And then that will fit into the license agreements once the research itself ends up in a product, and that product is ready for market. So that is, honorable members, the basis of documenting the information and the kind of information that we have on both the documentation centers and the registration system. But if the information that is in the documentation system does not have or does not meet the three eligibility criteria, it is then stored in the documentation center for preservation and for issues of promotion. So that is how we've been doing this. We are working on making the registration system work. As soon as the regulations are approved by the minister after having taken it through the parliamentary processes, we'll have a registration system, and the communities will be able, through their trustees, to register their information in the registration system. Thanks, DG.
DG? I think, Chair, we've just, I
Off,
heard the
DG.
generator kick in, so maybe he's been kicked out.
But were you able to hear me from
Yeah,
your
yeah,
side?
we were able
All
to
right.
hear, I was able to hear you, Shumi. So I assume
Okay.
the other members were able to as well.
All right, thanks, DG.
We did. Let's just see, because I think DG wanted to make a few last remarks. Okay, we're just gonna give DG like a minute and see if he can hop back on. Okay, DG's come back onto the platform. DG, Shumi had finished, so we were just waiting for you to then make your concluding remarks.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I'm sorry, it's the load shedding. We just switched off from normal to the generator. The three things that we would like to excite the committee on the decadal plan is the work that we are doing to be part of the investment conference on the 14th of April. So we've been invited to be part of that because there's a feeling that whilst we are attracting investment broadly in the country, it is important for us to also try and attract investment to support science, technology, and innovation. So we'll be part of that. And then the second one is we've just had exciting interests from about 3 countries on the work that we're doing in hydrogen. So as part of the commercialization of that work, there's a broad discussions in the UK. We'll be hosting a delegation from the UK next week, the week thereafter. We're going there on the week of the 23rd. We have an interest from Singapore. And then we've just had an exhibition in Japan. And then thirdly, we've just finalized our work on how the science institutions coming together can begin to produce locally vaccines, not just the fill and finish, but from the antigen clinical trials and all the way to good manufacturing. So these are key initiatives that we'll be driving in the next 12 months. Of course, the others in terms of socializing the societal grand challenges and look at how, for instance, the investments that we've made on the science of understanding climate change can begin to give us early warning for some of the disasters that we're seeing. So, Chair, I think we've tried to be as comprehensive as we can, but we take the point that at our APP presentation, let's present this broader framework on the things where we are working on addressing those bigger challenges. And then we acknowledge all the areas where you would like us to enhance our work. And we hope you find our interaction as useful and as challenging and fulfilling for the country and the taxpayers that you sign off on us and the entities to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, DG. And thank you very much to the entire collective from the department. Sorry. I think for me, what we must agree on is that one, there's some information that you need to send to the committee, and we also need to, from what you have in the past, send to us, share with Honorable Chirwa. 2, some of the long-term plans that, well, not long-term, but it's an ongoing work, right? Because we're not starting a new conversation here. But let's just see how we can incorporate some of what you've even responded to into the performance plans. And 3, yeah, we want to acknowledge the great work that you are doing, DG. Excuse me, the fact that we are represented by, well, that South Africa is represented in the board or in the council of SKAO. You know, the last three highlights that you've just shared with us, the completion or the finalization of the decadal plan in terms of it being approved by cabinet, and now we're implementing. So those things must also be acknowledged. And then of course there's this concern about, you know, reports not being sent on time, how funds are being utilized, and those things we must just incorporate into the plans, you know, and say this is how we're going to curb X, Y, and Z. Of course, you have responded to some of them. With that being said, colleagues, I think this brings us to the end of our meeting. We don't meet quorum, so we can't adopt minutes. We will be seeing each other, honorable members, from the 19th, but if there's any changes from on the parliamentary program, not the committee program, on the parliamentary program, you will be informed. We are going to have the APPs physically, colleagues. These are the last APPs we will receive as a committee. So in our lifetime as a committee, these are the last APPs we'll receive. And so we are going to have really dense briefings where we have a lot of the department's entities there. And so we will appeal to colleagues to be very patient with the process and to commit themselves to the process. These are the last annual performance plans that we will receive as a portfolio committee in the 6th administration. So I think it's very important for us to cover all of the entities and for us to meet in person so that we, you know, and deal with and be able to contribute as contributor. So those first 2 weeks when we come back, we're going to have physical sittings or physical committee meetings, and so we urge that you plan accordingly and that you are patient and supportive of the process. With that being said, that brings us to the end of our meeting. I wish members and members in particular well with their constituency work, and I wish all of us, those who observe the Christian religion or who practice the Christian religion, to enjoy their festive activities during the next couple of weeks. Those of us who'll be resting, let's rest and come back recuperated. And please stay safe. We really want to see you back here, all of you, so that we can continue doing this important work that we do. Yeah, I think then that's it from my side for now. If I've left anything out, you'll just email it to yourselves. It's 12:18 and this meeting has come to an end. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair.
Recording stopped.